Hello everybody, my name is Akimli. Every once in a while you come across a game that perfects RPG, but doesn't have the best gunplay. And sometimes you come across a game that perfects gunplay and doesn't have the best RPG elements. And then every once in a while those things smash together and a game emerges. Today, we're going to be grabbing everything that isn't nailed down and has adhesive. We're going to try to find a baby, which we don't really care about, while building entire cities as a side mission. And we're going to turn a firearm into a safety hazard. Today, we're going to be talking about Fallout 4. Fallout 4 starts off by giving us a look at what the old world used to be before the war started. It introduces us to our son and our loving wife or not always loving wife, it could be loving husband as well. I just mostly play as the male characters because, I don't know, I prefer that he's like a soldier. I don't know. I like him. It introduces us to our son and our loving wife, or your husband, depending on who you picked, as we walk around our house and we see all the luxuries of the Fallout series new and shiny like Codsworth. He looks amazing, beautiful, peak perfection. We get to see it all not as bleak as we're used to. Everything is vibrant and it feels like a color palette straight from the 50s, because everything in most Fallout games tends to be a lot more gray and dull, which is a nice change, actually. One thing the Fallout characters would notice when playing is that the main character has a voice, like mine, but better, because they're actually paid voice actors and not a freak who decides to spend his time on YouTube. This breaks the trend of silent protagonists we are used to in the Fallout series, and honestly, the voice actors do a good job at being neutral, so I can still kind of roleplay, but it's a little immersion breaking. But I'll go back into that later. Maybe. After we are introduced to the world before everything happened, we get to experience the nuclear bombs going off, which is pretty cool, and we manage to escape to Vault 111. Vault 111. After watching our spouse get absolutely murdered, who we were really, really, really attached to, we see the murderer come up to our tank. We were frozen, forgot to mention that part. We were basically turned into a TV dinner, and we were frozen. Yeah, it was not very fun. But this guy comes up to us, and we remember his face. That'll be important later. I'm not talking about it, but it'll be important later for the quest. And as we wake from our sleep, all we want is to be able to get revenge for our spouse who's been murdered, and also find our son. I think it's mostly just to find our son. Now, this plot is pretty good to start off with. One thing that happens when you are trying to save someone or find something is that you tend not to do that in video games. Now, this isn't really that big of a problem to begin with. And if you want, you can do the logical thing and go straight for Diamond City, try finding your son, all that stuff. But you could also build a massive fortress along with collecting every single, like one of those giddy-up toys inside of the wasteland. Because why the hell not? Because no one actually cares about Sean. Let's all be honest here, no one cares about Sean. I enjoy the progression in Fallout games because if you want, you can actually just go do your own thing in the wasteland most of the time. Emphasis on most of the time, because sometimes that's not an option. If you know what you're doing or where you're going, rather than just following the main quest, or hell, just ignoring the main quest and exploring the surroundings like I tend to do, when you get into the wasteland, a lot of things have been reinvented and others added, so it adds another level of new things. For example, when you get into the wasteland, there's the abomination called pipe weapons, and then there's some cool new things like the Mirelurks. I really like the new looks of the Mirelurks, how they're more crabbish. They look... Is that a word? Is crabbish a word? I'll have to look that up later. Anyways, I feel that overall the game did an amazing job of taking the setting of the previous games and adding on to it. We had seen plenty of the desert and a bit of big cities like DC, but the setting of Fallout 4 has elements from those previous games, like the design from those worlds, but it also adds things relating to the Boston or the Commonwealth theme. For example, the city region of Boston is really reminiscent of the DC ruins with like super mutants everywhere. It's pretty hard to deal with, and it's a higher stakes area. There's going to be a lot more enemies there, and there's not going to be as much breathing room. Not to mention how there's actually some new people showing up. Well, I shouldn't say new, I mean like old people showing up. For example, Elder Maxon and McCready were both in Fallout 3, and now they have progressed from Fallout 3, and they're in Fallout 4, and they can actually be both interacted with. In Fallout 4, we see some things that really set things apart from the other Fallout titles. First and foremost, there's the way the guns work. Instead of guns being the old, janky guns the original fans are used to, we have guns that operate more similarly to, say, Call of Duty or something like that. It acts like those weapons more than anything else. In addition to the way guns work, a lot of new guns are added, along with the ability to customize them and make them more useful. Customization was a thing in previous titles, but it was not nearly as fleshed out as the one inside of Fallout 4, making guns and armor, if you have an armorer's workbench. I personally don't really remember messing around with armor that much. It makes it even better. It makes it legendary weapons if you manage to get some from a legendary enemy, who are usually more mutated. Like, for example, if you are close to killing them, they'll mutate, gather the health back, so it's like you have to kill them twice. They're pretty messed up, and they're pretty hard to take care of. There is additions to the perk system that are good. Not bad, not amazing. I mean, like, it's a welcome addition, because I feel like some of the perks, especially in Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas did a good job. I feel like some of the perks were a little finicky, along with the system that they were using. And I like the new roadmap they added, where you can actually see the progression you're going through, and also see like the animated little pictures or whatever, whenever you hover over. It's cool. Like, I feel like that's a welcome addition. It's really nice. Something that wasn't really seen before when it came to Fallout 4 was settlement building. Now, settlement building can be a gift and a curse. I'll talk about the positive now, but I'll talk about the positive when I cover all of that in a little bit. Settlement building adds another element to Fallout 4. Building can help you by giving you resources and things like that, but it also gives you a lot more playability. Making a cool settlement is something I would do for every settlement in the world of Fallout 4, and have a blast while doing it. The faction that focuses on building settlements is the Minutemen. The Minutemen have a pretty good story, even though they do have a couple flaws. Again, I'll get to that in like a minute. There's plenty more that Fallout 4 does, but there's only one thing that I absolutely love that they added. Like, completely game changer. Power armor. Power armor doesn't feel like another combat armor or like a thing you can just put on. No, it's not that. It's a tank. It's a tank that you wear. Being able to power through enemies with the Pain Train perk and jump off of massive skyscrapers and just look crazy while doing it feels refreshing. It's added so much to the game. But now that I've complimented the game, of course, there are some flaws with the game that I'll have to cover as well. Now that I've talked about the great things that Fallout 4 does, it's time to talk about some of the negative. First and foremost is the lack of player choice. You are given the illusion of having 4 answers to a question, but most of the time what you say will get a small difference of a response. Like maybe a different voice line or something like that might happen right before they say the exact same thing they would say if you picked any of the other options, which is really annoying because you actually want to have a difference and be able to do things differently, just like in Fallout New Vegas where choice matters and things like that. However, it doesn't feel as much like that. Rather, the story is a little less. Don't get me wrong, the factions themselves, being able to have that diversity, it's still pretty good. The 4 factions being able to pick one, not to mention the interactions factions can have, like the Minutemen working with the Railroad, the Brotherhood fighting against the Minutemen, all sorts of things. It can be a lot of different fights for a lot of different reasons. This is especially annoying, however, with the shortened down thing that the player will say. So whenever you're picking an option for what you're going to say, it will be a shortened down version, and it can mean something completely different than what you think. The voice that the character has is a little immersion breaking, like I said before, but you don't really notice it as much as just the speech as a whole being a little strange. It's really just point and click. Any option you do, whether it's negative or something like that, doesn't change anything. It's the same way with, at the very beginning of the game, a salesman comes. Anything you ask, unless it's something relating to do with information about what Vault Tech is or the Vault is, will lead to the same path. And that's basically a summary of most conversations inside of Fallout 4. A lot of that is just the same thing over and over again of being able to just pick and choose, but you're not really choosing anything. The gunplay is pretty straightforward, but a lot of the guns in Fallout 4 don't look good or just don't make sense, or at least that's what I've heard. Now, I don't really care about that. Like, the combat rifle and the assault rifle don't look that great, and they look like they would explode if they were actual firearms. And don't even get me started on the pipe weapons. I swear to God, if I ever play Fallout 4, I have to mod the pipe weapons to at least look decent, so that the people I'm killing who are using pipe weapons don't make my eyes bleed. Because it will make my eyes bleed if I ever have to see that. The one thing that I don't really like isn't like the attachments or anything like that, like pipe weapons, like I was saying, but I'm talking about the number of guns. I did my own research here because I wasn't able to find an exact estimate. I was able to count 66 weapons in the base game, not counting unarmed, I believe. I wasn't able to get it completely accurate, so keep in with me. It's like 66 between something 70. Without DLC or unique weapons, that's how many weapons there are, 66. And in Fallout New Vegas, there is 106 weapons in the base game. And this is not including the gun runners arsenal. That's what they're called, gun runners. This makes it so whenever I find a new weapon most of the time, it doesn't feel unique in Fallout 4. I can still play Fallout New Vegas and be like, oh my god, there's that gun. Especially with the gun runners arsenal. I remember being able to see GR, I think it's GRA is the abbreviation for whenever you find a gun runner's arsenal weapon. I remember finding a sawed-off shotgun for the first time and upgrading it and just using it for hours on end. The guns they have in that game are really fun, and there's a lot of them. There's recharger rifles, there's different plasma rifles, there's all sorts of things. But Fallout 4 just feels like, hey, I'm getting the same gun but with different attachments. That's not nearly as fun, because I don't feel like anytime I go to a steamer chest or one of those things for my loot, it's just the same thing. And really, it's kind of annoying. It's kind of annoying having to deal with that because I don't feel rewarded. I don't feel rewarded for what I do because a majority of what I was doing in Fallout New Vegas was the cool new guns and stuff. Like, one of the biggest cool guns that the Minutemen gives you right after you complete the story is a fully automatic musket. A fully automatic laser musket. Like, sure, that's cool for like a minute or two, but are you ever going to use that? Of course, I know there's going to be some people who are going to be like, yes, that's my main weapon, but what I'm saying here is it's just a bunch of different variants of the same thing. And that's ignoring the unique weapons, by the way. Just making that clear, base game, not unique weapons. There are a lot of good unique weapons inside of Fallout 4 and Fallout New Vegas, respectively. The factions in Fallout 4 tend to be pretty mid, and I feel repeated. For example, the Institute is basically a less aggressive, trying to be good guy enclave. They're like the same sort of techie, but like also like critical of people in the Commonwealth, like a-holes basically. They're just like the Enclave. And then there is the Minutemen, who rely way too much on the player to do everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. I'm pretty sure if you played Fallout 4 with the Minutemen, you will recognize Preston Garvey saying another settlement needs your help in your nightmares. Because you have to do everything all the time, constantly. And it's all just the same thing. Like I've said before, it's just the same thing. Because they're repeating the same sort of quest over and over again in a different area, where it is kill raiders, do this. Fetch quest. It's just a fetch quest over and over again. Yeah, that's the word. Fetch quest. The railroad is a cool idea, and I like it. It's cool. I'm not saying I dislike any of the factions, by the way, here. I'm just saying they're flaws. Because I do get bored of some of them, but I usually come around. I feel like the railroad just consists of a bunch of stereotypes. They're not really stereotypes, just like generic people. Like, for example, we have the hardened doctor, and then we have the guy who is smart but eccentric, and we have, like, an assaultron named Sam. I don't know. I mean, Deacon is kind of alright, but he also feels like a mixture between a surfer dude and something. I can't place a finger on it, but he's something. And now, I'm not saying they're entirely stereotypical. Like, I like the characters. They're alright. It's just, I feel like they could have maybe done more. Specifically, I feel like the Railroad would have been really good as a side faction. Think like the Boomers from Fallout New Vegas. The Boomers from Fallout New Vegas were able to help you in the long run, but they're not a faction who actually take over the New Vegas Strip and also the Mojave Wasteland. Rather, they're just doing their own thing, chilling. I feel like the Railroad would have been really good for that, along with adding more factions in general, along with the Railroad, and having a couple main factions who you would side with, just like in Fallout New Vegas. That would have been epic. The Brotherhood of Steel, I mean, I don't have any complaints. It just feels a little repeated, like I said before. They could have come up with something new, but they just did the Brotherhood of Steel again. Like, don't get me wrong, Ad Victoriam, Brotherhood of Steel all day. They're cool. But it feels a little unoriginal. I feel like they could have done something here. Like, it's Boston. It's completely away. Like, I know the DC ruins and all that stuff, Fallout 3. But I feel like they could have done something more. I feel like they really could have. Like, a new faction in Boston. I feel like they're just playing it safe with some of the factions. I mean, ignoring Fallout 76, where they literally have two factions called the Raiders and the Settlers. I'll get to that eventually. But yeah, I feel like they're just playing it safe with some of these factions. Not saying they have bad story, by the way, because the Pridwin flying in was epic. The whole Liberty Prime revitalized thing was epic. I'm not saying bad story. I'm just saying in general, I feel like you guys could have maybe used a little unique touch there. Now that I'm done with that, I think it's time for the final thoughts. I know I said Fallout 4 has flaws, and it does, but I don't want to take away from the title of this video. Rather, I just want to say Fallout 4 is the future of what Fallout will look like. just like I said in the title. The modding capability was already popular for previous Fallout games, but now people add all sorts of stuff to the game, Fallout 4, and sometimes they even make their own projects. There are entire DLC-sized mods being created by entire teams of people that recreate Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and even take us to places we've never been to before. Like London, Fallout London. Whenever that comes out, I'm going to be playing that forever. Really, the modding potential is there. I feel like Fallout 4 is a step to the future because it has revitalized Fallout as a whole and has shown Bethesda what can be improved on. If Fallout 4 doesn't have the flaws it had, it might have been one of, if not my favorite Fallout game. I feel like if whatever game in the future improves on those concepts, we could have a really, really good Fallout game on our hands. Like usual, I suggest that you try Fallout 4 because I have a lot of fun playing this. I remember I played a mixture of Fallout 4, maybe Escape from Tarkov, I can't remember, and a couple others whenever the pandemic was first destroying our social lives and everything we hold dear. And I have so many fond memories of playing this game while I was alone eating ramen inside of my room. I know some people might not play the original Fallout games because of the graphics, but this game does not have that problem. So if you want to get soaked into Fallout but you don't want to play the older ones, try this one. It should get you going. Oh, and one last thing before I go, I will not, and I swear, I will not be doing a review for the VR version of this game. It's basically the exact same story. It would really just be talking about like the POV and how bad it is. I'm not doing it. I'm not buying that game because I need to buy it so I can have footage in the background. I am not buying Fallout 4 VR because that is a waste of money. Because unless you mod it, which you should never have to mod a game to make it work, well, Fallout New Vegas. You get the idea. I'm not going to be doing it. But, whatever, I guess I'll catch you guys later. Akimli out.
You aren't real! You aren't real!